Hey everybody, I'm Ryan, or I should probably start saying the name of the channel more, S Reaper G. This is another reaction video, one that I haven't done in a while, a reaction video that is. I'm going to be reacting to a video that Game Informer published a few months ago about Mass Effect Andromeda, and why Mass Effect Andromeda may not be as bad a game as you have thought that it is, or you think it is, or you may have heard that it was. And no, it's not super relevant, and I know this is old, and maybe it's not relevant in the grand scheme of things, but I continue to work on my own Mass Effect content, and I got Mass Effect on the brain pretty much at all times, Andromeda included. It seemed relevant to me, and I'm definitely not going to agree with everything that they say in this video, I imagine, but I thought it could provoke an interesting discussion and something to talk about. So let's react to this. Someone is probably definitely going to already comment on this video and tell me that I talked way too much over the video, and you'll probably be right about that. But hey, it is a reaction video, so... Oh, hit that subscribe button, by the way. I did skip a bit in the beginning, just so you know, by the way, because that's just where they set the video up and talk about what they're doing here. So, you're welcome, I guess. Anyway, let's do it. I'm gonna just switch screens here.
Like, maybe Andromeda wasn't that bad.
This isn't, yeah, I think the point of this video, right, is to show why, or tell you why that this game should not have been a series killer, as it has been.
I do agree with that. It should not have been a series killer at all.
I know, right?
It shouldn't have been.
On and on and on about
because, you know, Mass Effect Andromeda is an interesting game because I enjoyed it when I played it at launch, and even my most recent playthrough, I did like it, but it's just kind of like, it doesn't hit as good as that original trilogy of games, and I think you all know what I'm talking about there. But should I have killed the whole series, or at least put it on a hiatus? Definitely not.
There's a lot of like blind loyalty, and
for sure.
And I haven't been subtle with my love of Mass Effect, so I just want people to know that we are thinking critically. This isn't blind fandom or anything like that.
No, this is I think Andromeda is an overlooked game, and I think my first reason for that is it, bar none, has the best combat in the entire series. Like, they took what was in Mass Effect 1, right, which, you know, they're still trying to figure out like the RPG elements of it mixed with how do they make this an engaging shooter, right, and they really did an amazing job of making a fast-paced, high action, high octane combat experience, right? Like,
so
Ryder's
this is an interesting one for me, because while I do generally agree that Mass Effect Andromeda, like everybody else has said, does have good combat, and a lot of people just say, oh, keep everything about Andromeda, or at least drop everything about Andromeda, just keep its combat. I actually disagree a little bit, because I actually felt that 3 definitely just had it down pat. When I recently played 3, I was playing it like, wow, this thing still holds up pretty well. So while I do think Andromeda got a lot more creative, like for example, you can pull in people and hold that biotic pull and then throw them off with a biotic throw and throw them off of like cliffs and ledges and buildings. I do think it got more creative and it'll let you do more combos and stuff, and I think that's definitely awesome. I just generally I just feel that Mass Effect 3's combat is a little bit tighter, just because it doesn't have the jumping and the dashing that I think Andromeda has. And while I do appreciate that mechanic, I just feel like 3 definitely was a little more, was not a little more, just tighter overall, if I had to say. I'm gonna stop rambling and continue watching, though.
Play spaces and a full grasp on how these weapons are gonna work. And I think they, like, the biotics, especially there too, hit their peak in their usability, and like it just makes for really fun,
like I said, doing the pull and
like,
throw of biotics.
Shooters, I think there's a lot.
Really enjoyable.
Oh man, being able to jump up in the air, hover, and then snipe was so satisfying.
That's also a very good point.
Oh my god,
you could hover for a little bit when you're shooting.
Like, especially playing through the Legendary Edition again, and playing through the very rooted Mass Effect 1, where you have very limited movement. It really shined a light of how beautiful Andromeda's movement was through the world. And I don't know. I think
Mass Effect 1 still has a charm to it, though. Just its clunkiness. It still has a charm to it.
The 2 tips I usually tell people when they go and play for the first time is, 1, know that Ryder is different. Ryder is a very different protagonist. Actually, very relatable too, if people give him a chance, or her a chance if you play the sister. But Ryder is very dorky. And you see that when you try to flirt with people. Like there's literally like a flirting line. It's like, you like stuff. And it's funny because Shepard's like super smooth. Like, yeah, we're gonna bang. Like, I feel like that's something that people are kind of expecting. And Ryder's a kid. Like Ryder is a very young adult.
So I struggle with a lot of that stuff. I go back and forth on some of those lines of like the flirting and the awkwardness with Ryder, and I wonder, when I say go back and forth, what I mean is that I go back and forth in wondering, is it that he's dorky, that they wrote it that way intentionally, or is it just because the dialogue is not as well written as it was in the original trilogy there, because of the time constraints that they were under for various reasons that we can all talk about and that are well documented? That's what I wonder, really, when it comes to Andromeda. Is I go back and forth on those things, because there are definitely parts of the dialogue that make me laugh and I find them funny, but I don't know if that's just a result of the fact that they kind of half committed to this idea of Ryder being awkward. And also, I don't know why I did that, but you know what I mean.
Not trained. Like Shepard was a Spectre. Shepard was in 7. Shepard was military. They were trained to do what they did.
Yep.
Versus Ryder was the kid of somebody that was trained. It was his father that was trained up in the combat. It was father that was in 7. It was his father that had the leadership mentality and the preparation for that role. And then suddenly he's not. And suddenly Ryder's the one in that role. And they don't have the time to learn. It's kind of make it up as you go, which I think everybody can kind of relate to. That's kind of life.
Yeah.
And
I think that's something that's very much overlooked about Andromeda. I'm glad she brought that up, because that is something that I did feel in my most recent playthrough with Andromeda, is that there's definitely this sense that Ryder is not confident at all in his ability or her ability to kind of be a pathfinder. And as you play the game, that kind of smooths away a little bit. Now, again, like a lot of things I feel about Andromeda, I almost feel like they half committed to this idea of doing it, and they were kind of like hesitant to do it. So it's not fully realized, at least in my opinion. But I do think that translates better, at least more than I thought it did originally when I was played the game originally.
Learning, like, okay, maybe I'm not as useless as I thought. Like they've got that young person insecurity,
where Shepard is more of a master tactician, as in a sense.
And I thought that was very interesting to see,
by the way that they have us play him.
You get the family aspect,
or her.
like with Shepard, you could do the storyline where he had a family. You didn't have to go Earthborn, you didn't have to go the orphan route, but like you never really got to interact. Versus this one, this story is very rooted in family, which is a different experience, and I think we should explore that kind of stuff in the Mass Effect world, and I would love to explore more of that. And then 2 is EOS. Okay, one of the biggest issues with
I think I know what she's gonna say here.
The fact that
I think I know where she's going with this.
God awful. You go into the hinterlands and you're gonna be there for hours, and it's like, holy crap, can I ever get out of this freaking area? Especially because there's not a lot to do there that is impactful on the story. But when you're stuck there for hours, you think that's all there is to the story, and it's kind of the same.
That is Andromeda to a T. It has horrible pacing issues throughout.
You've got adrenaline, you've got action, you've got what's gonna happen. And then you drop on EOS and it's never ending.
That's something I want to talk about in another video, as I want to talk about the opening moments to Mass Effect Andromeda, because the actual first hour or 2 of the game are fantastic in my opinion. I will always go to bat for those. But when you get to these moments, like she said, when you get to EOS, it is very like heavy on the giving you things to do that are really not that interesting and not that impactful to what you really want to be doing. You almost feel, or at least I felt, you almost begin to start feeling like you're more of a community manager than an actual pathfinder, and it's just this repetition of tasks and just so much going on. It's just
that
it's too much, man.
Really sets up that first perception, especially because you don't even meet some of the characters until you're like close to like something
halfway. Like, yeah.
It took me, I think, 15 hours before I met Reyes, which is a pivotal character, and Jal, which is another core character, as a squad mate romance option. And so a lot of people I've noticed that couldn't stand it never got past EOS because they're like, this is so ridiculous. And also the trilogy gave us beautiful Asari and Andromeda definitely went a more generic route with Asari. But
Can't defend the
thing
Asari
with
and Andromeda.
is
Like,
that the story is
they just-
actually really beautiful. It just
they-
takes a bit to get
they look
there,
all the same.
but it took risks in a way of you're getting to see this galaxy, this universe that, even though they're in a different area, it's still the same society that Shepard was in. This is during the time of Andromeda, and you're getting to see a different perspective of that. And I feel like that kind of got overlooked because of the technical issues.
For sure. Well, I think, like you said, not a lot of people even got to that point because, and I should have said this in the beginning, but if you remember, right, EA did a early access first 10 hours, right, that I think you could play, and it ruined it from the gate because it was just memes at that point. It was just gifs of the crazy like turtle walks and the crazy like faces and stuff like that. So
I don't remember that at all, to be honest. I'm sure it happened. I don't remember it.
100% right that they never even got off EOS, which, like you said, is where the story starts to come through and your character starts to come through in a combat perspective.
Yeah, and you hear that with like games like The Witcher 3.
And really
you hear that like
strength of
a lot of
those
people just didn't finish The Witcher 3.
I remember when they
because
said that
it was
gonna
just
do the 10
so
hour,
much.
I remember telling
there's just so much to that
worked at the
game.
studio, like, oh, that is a bad idea. I wish you guys wouldn't do that. And I wish it was those times where I wished I had more power, because I was like, if I could go back in time, I would do my damnedest, because that with a game is that expansive, with that big of a pacing issue right out of the gate, that was shooting themselves in the foot. That was the dumbest thing they could have ever done. I get people want to play games early, but that's not a norm, and it doesn't need to be a norm. And when you can't give people a chance. The same thing with Anthem when they did the first.
Yeah, and this is something that I've always I always talk about is that
just were blank.
Those opening moments, the opening hours of a game, are the most critical to whether you stick with that game.
Like for me, one of the biggest strengths of Andromeda was how it tied into the trilogy so beautifully, and a big way you could see that is through a quest line that is an ongoing quest line from the very beginning till the very end, and it's the memory trigger sequence. And so many people did not do that because, one, it's very extensive and long. So it's just like, oh my God. Like you can't.
No, it is.
Like a lot of times with side
quests,
you can just go knock
kind
it
of
out,
like the whole problem with Andromeda.
This one is designed
that pacing
to last
of
the entire
there's
game,
just so much going on, and it's just so much meaningless stuff that you might miss something like this.
Memory sequence you can't even find until you're at the end of the game. And a lot of people just assumed that was a bug, and it's not. It was designed to be that way. But there also was a launch issue where there was one location that wasn't interactable, and so it wasn't triggering it, but that got fixed really quickly as well. But that to me, because in the game you do get these throwbacks to the trilogy of, you get to hear Liara talking about the Reaper War, you get to hear her
that I do remember. I don't remember some of the
quests
specifics of it very fondly, or not fondly, but a lot. But I do remember that.
As a player in Mass Effect Legendary Edition, it's the same thing applies in Andromeda. There is so much critical story line hidden within the side quest. One of my favorites is a side quest on EOS where you can actually meet Zaid's son, who, for those that played the DLC, Zaid was a mercenary in the Mass Effect trilogy, Mass Effect 2 and 3, and a weird character. And to hear his son talk, his name is Bane, he is such a spitting image of his dad, and it was just very funny to see a young version of Zaid and talk to him. But then once you finish it, without going into, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I'm gonna avoid like the actual twist, because that's
I don't really find that interesting, the whole Bane Masani thing. It's cool, I guess,
particular mission,
but I guess I don't know.
A really cool throwback to Garrus, which is obviously it's
best
not
boy.
Garrus, best boy. Everybody loves Birdman.
Yeah.
And
who doesn't like
very
Garrus?
Intricate tieback.
Unpopular Mass Effect fans, huh? Let me tell you that.
Text. It was an actual throwback.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And then you hear more of Liara. You actually get to hear the moment the Reapers invade.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really special. And they play clips from the trilogy. It's like you'll hear a clip that you'll remember from Mass Effect 3.
I emphasize. I can't say the word apparently. I have empathy for the team working on this game, because it's not easy to follow up the Mass Effect trilogy in the way that they wanted to. So they're introducing all these characters and all these new storylines and all this whole new like dynamic of all these characters and everything interacting. So I do not envy that. I understand it, actually. I really do. I understand how hard that must have been for them to do. So it's almost like they kind of needed to have those like connective tissues between the trilogy and Andromeda in order to really just tell people like, hey, this is still Mass Effect, even if it is a different story in a different game. So I do commend them for at least trying to do stuff like that with the tie-ins. Like I said, I don't really find
regime changing up.
Bane that interesting,
the
but
moment the Reapers
whatever.
hit and Admiral Hackett declares basically a state of an emergency, galaxy-wide.
Yeah.
And but it was just special. It kind of
Who gave him that authority?
Though, to what made Andromeda different and special in its own right. Of Shepard, my team is my family, the fight no matter what, and then Andromeda is my family is my family.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, and we don't know what the hell's going on any of the time, but we're doing our best anyway.
And you're in that together, which I thought was really interesting, and I liked that. Brings actually to another point of why I think this game is special, and I do think COVID eyes are a part of this, right? But I liked the game's emphasis on exploration more, not more than the original trilogy, right? I still the OG trilogy is goaty, but like for me, like being in quarantine for so long, I had such a wanderlust that nothing could quell, right? But to be in this game where we're going to different planets, you're exploring the different resources.
That's one of the
really,
strongest
like,
parts of Andromeda is just the design of the planets,
really
generally speaking. Exploring them,
I
not
know some people
as
have
interesting,
that's the way
but
the series went. I feel
design-wise, it's
one of
really
the
cool.
strengths of these games, right, is this universe and this lore and what BioWare's created. And I thought they did a really good job of letting you explore that and see what else is out there outside of, you know, the planets that we're already familiar with.
Yeah, agreed. It was beautiful because too, all of the locations looked very different from each other, which is important because if you're gonna have set up a game where you're gonna be spending hours exploring a planet, they need to be very different.
Yeah, and Mass Effect Andromeda has a lot of verticality to it.
Man, can't all be perfect.
I hate it so bad.
Yeah.
And the characters were great too. Like Liam was such a dork.
Yep.
And
he does nothing for me. Does nothing for me. That stinky ass couch. Come on.
Star Wars Easter egg that just has me dying every time. His romance is pretty charming too, because like it's very much like they're best friends and partners at the same time, which reminds me of my marriage because like we are burping contests, and I think when I met my husband, I was like, "Hey, what's up, loser?" And like that's kind of what built, and I like that friendship. And then there's just funny moments within the crew, like Jal and Liam have a really cool and relationship with each other. I still can't really feel any attachment to Korra. I keep trying to. I've got 9 playthroughs of Andromeda.
They don't. A lot of the characters didn't do a lot for me.
Still more than most.
Not a lot of them just don't.
I think,
unfortunately.
Like you talked about Bold, I think one of my favorite moments in the early game, right, is mid-game, however you want to call it, is I had PB and Jal in whatever the Mako is in this one, right? And just
the
they're
Nomad.
so the Nomad, excuse me, yeah. And they're just so different, but also like there was one moment where PB was like actively like sexually flirting with me, and Jal's like, I do not want to be here, like what's happening? And she's like, got him. Like, it's that there's a level of humor and levity and connection between these characters that I think does a very like recaptures some of those moments. Is there a Garrus? Not necessarily, but I think
don't
Jal
know.
is great. I think, like you said, Liam.
I don't know if I fully agree with that because they have those like banters back and forth.
Especially if
they have those banters back and forth when you're in the Nomad, but in Dragon Age, it always felt more conversational. I actually think they do a better job of this in Mass Effect 3 when you have the crew on the Normandy just like talking and kind of, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, shooting the shit. But in Dragon Age, it always felt more conversational, but in Andromeda, it's a lot of just like one-liners and little quips, and it's like blah, 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 blah. And that's it. It doesn't really tell you about the relationship that these characters have. Now, I'm sure that they do talk to each other. I think they do have more banter and stuff, and they do talk to each other more. I shouldn't say I think. I know that they talk to each other more in different parts of the game, like on the Normandy, on the Tempest and stuff. But it just doesn't have that same kind of feeling that like Dragon Age does, or how Dragon Age does it probably the best. Even in Mass Effect 1, in those elevator
You finish 3
sequences.
and you're like, God, all I want is more Mass Effect. Like, I think you're gonna go into this and not be disappointed. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good point though. The banter when they're in the Nomad is hilarious, and it was a lot more frequent than it is, in the trilogy of that.
Again, it's just not as
conversational. Which is something that I really
conversational.
love about Dragon Age is anytime you're in a squad with your in Dragon Age, they're all having banter. Like it's funny and it's engaging, and it sets up that these people have lives outside of the protagonist, and I think that's great. And then there's somebody for everybody. Like there's not a Morden, but there is a Slarian, and he's got his own charm. And then you have the tea lover, and then you have the
I don't know what that means.
I really liked Liam.
Tea
I really
lover?
liked Reyes too. I've done both. There's a big choice you can make with
Suvi?
his character and another character. And I've done both. After beating it with choosing Reyes, I really developed an attachment to them as well. And yeah, it's and you know what? Tying back to the memory trigger sequence, it sets up the future pretty nicely.
Yeah.
And especially with the teaser trailer we had for the future of Mass Effect, we have a huge deep dive on the website, by the way. It's the Tale of Two Galaxies, and I broke it down. It's like 4,000 words. I brought panels in from the comics.
Yeah.
Hard. And some of the tie-ins were to Andromeda too. And I feel like if you're interested in the future, obviously we know Liara's much older. I would put her at now around 800 years, given off the trailer, and also I've confirmed that she's much older with the BioWare dubs as well. So we know it's very much set in the future.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the ending of the memory trigger sequence
Interesting.
is really special in that way too, because you even hear Liara basically say goodbye. Like you can tell Liara, she has that moment of, I don't think we're going to make it out of this, which is a very heavy theme in Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
And she basically pleads with Ryder's family, like, please don't forget us. I don't think you're going to have something to come back to, because the Andromeda Initiative wasn't necessarily meant to be permanent for some people. And that's basically her telling us, like, your life that you left that you were hoping to come back to is gone.
I don't know what you could go back to after
That
600
loss,
years
man,
of being
it's
gone, but
impactful. It really is
you know.
impactful. and they weren't afraid. I wish they had more aliens, because I think that's part of Mass Effect's magic, is learning about the different species.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Sorry, guys.
That is something that you need to know going into this. Like, Andromeda was going a certain way. BioWare's not going to go that way anymore. So it's like, you have to know that playing this, there's going to be some loose ends. So
They might. While there is no Andromeda sequel, we know that BioWare did say that the sky's the limit of what they pull from. So I really think, my personal prediction is they're going to pull very heavily from the trilogy and Andromeda.
I want them to do that too.
Tail, like
Yeah.
they're scrapping everything from Andromeda too. But
I
I think
don't
they're going to pull a lot more from Andromeda.
No, and I hope they do that, because I want them to do. Yeah. How old am I? I want them to do that, because I think there's a way that they can recontextualize some of the things that happened in Andromeda and Andromeda itself, and make it a more interesting or more cohesive, or at least retroactively make it look a little bit better than it actually was. Because, like, for example, with like the Clone Wars, the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show, it made the prequel trilogy of Star Wars like almost retroactively better, just by the fact that it was so good and just gave so much more context for these conflicts that were going on during the time of the Clone Wars era of Star Wars. So I definitely want them to see them do that. I want them to just pretend that it didn't exist, and I don't think they're going to. So I do agree here. I think that they're probably going to pull from Andromeda in some way. I don't know how, but I'm excited to find out.
Maybe people realize.
For sure.
And I think that's going to be very pivotal in some of the returning characters we see and the new characters we'll meet. So I think it's going to be exciting to see what happens. But that's for clarification, readers, for
sure.
Listeners.
No, that's a good call. But
it is years away. It's going to be a long time, my friends.
There's another Mass Effect. We don't know when it's coming. It'll probably be pretty far out at this point. But I think that's a good way to end it. I think That is a lovely piece by you, Liana, to really convince the good folks
Yeah,
out there.
so
Like, there's good game here, and especially
there is definitely
if
good game
you just
there.
can't get
There's
enough Mass
definitely
Effect after
good game.
Legendary Edition. Like one of my buddies already texted me. He's like, I'm doing Andromeda now.
Yeah, so I would definitely. So here's the thing: I would caution people who are saying, "Hey, you want more Mass Effect? Go to Andromeda," because you're not going to get the same level of quality that you got. You're just not. But that being said, I think it's important to also just understand what you're getting into, but you can definitely play it and enjoy it. And I like Andromeda myself, and I know that's not a popular thing to say around here, around these parts on the internet, you know what I mean? But it is a good game. It's not on the same level of the trilogy, and I don't want anyone to go in thinking that's gonna be a level. Now, if you disagree after playing it, then absolutely. But I'm just saying, keep your expectations in check. Don't go in expecting, wow, there's going to be a grand experiment of ideas like the trilogy was. Anyway, that being said, I'm really happy that this video exists, that they did this. I think it's really good to add to the conversation overall in a way about Andromeda in a more positive way. Maybe get you to think a bit differently about Andromeda. And I definitely am going to discuss some of these things in my own content about Andromeda. I hope you stick around for that, and I hope you found this interesting and fun, and I hope I didn't talk way too much over the video, but if I did, it's a reaction video. What do you want from me? So anyway, I'll see you guys next time. I hope you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for watching.